my name is Parker Spear and I'm a finalist in the Patterns of Performance competition of 2025. I'm currently finishing my master's degree at the Arts University of Bournemouth, and I have a background in women's wear from the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. I've always had a passion for storytelling through costume design, specifically in a historical costume context. I believe that costume design plays a vital role in an actor's performance, which is what drew me initially to the Patterns of Performance competition. I knew I wanted to choose an opera for my project because the nature of opera costumes followed closely with the kind of design I'm interested in. I wanted to create a costume that emits the aura of the 18th century through intentional design. I believe that a costume historian has the distinct task to cast a light on how relevant history is in our modern age. Following along with this theory, I chose to reimagine the character of Figaro from The Marriage of Figaro. This decision was also in part due to Mozart and his modern take on a classic story. His rendition of Le Nozze di Figaro was a story of love, deception, and forgiveness, and it was noted by figures like Napoleon Bonaparte that Mozart's opera was simply a sympathetic statement on the social climate of the time. The beauty I found in Mozart's attempt at Le Nozze di Figaro was his aim to unmask society by flipping the inner workings of society upside down. His opera was so powerful because he presented it to the very people he meant to unmask, during a time when society was on the brink of the French Revolution. For this competition, I wanted to experiment with modern technology, including the use of resin as well as the use of a 3D pen. My research into 18th century class divisions took me into a detailed look at the lavish embellishments and how this compared to what the lower class was wearing. I used Suzanne North's 18th century detail to look at close-up images of the elaborate trims and buttons present in menswear. This gave me the idea to recreate my buttons using the 18th century method of creating spangles. In the same vein, my idea for using a 3D pen to create my fabric is to recreate a 3D version of 18th century fabrics. To set the stage of my reimagined version of Figaro, I looked at images of the Château du Goudin in France, an 18th century chateau currently under refurbishment. The images I found were of peeling wallpaper and layers of patterns and textures to showcase years of history, to reveal what is hidden beneath the gold gilding architectural details. I took these details and translated them into the trims I used on the waistcoat as well as the center front and the center back of the frock coat. The idea of the peeling wallpaper is a metaphor of the masks of the aristocratic class. The peeling away represents the unmasking, much like Mozart's rendition of Le Nozze di Figaro.
Hello, my name is Philip Winter, and I'm a finalist for the Patterns for Performance Award. My costume is for the character Anton Antonovich, who is the corrupt mayor within Nikolai Gogol's Russian farce, The Government Inspector. When reading into this character, I noted his intense obsession with appearance and status. Throughout the storyline, he critiques the way others are dressed. Specifically, in just the opening scenes, he complains about how the guards of the town are dressed in rags, about how his sword is completely rusted through, all while boasting about his new hat, as if that would make him more presentable. These are just a few of the many examples within the text. In the end, the character I read was a deeply narcissistic man that embodied hypocrisy. When looking into other depictions of Anton, I saw a man dressed to the nines, but the character I read was far more sloppy in his appearance. In the end, I decided to go the route of attempting to make a costume that imposed hierarchy instantly, but also one that highlighted his sloppy, disheveled, and at times narcissistically macho attitude. With this, I thought his hypocrisy as a mayor would be emphasized. With this, I began delving into 18th century and 19th century Russia. I eventually settled on the era of the Battle of the Palaces, and specifically Tsar Paul I's reign. Under his reign, the Russian imperial army saw fanatical esprit de corps, tyrannically imposed. Tsar Paul's obsession with the Prussian king, Frederick the Great, played heavily into this. So much so that he redesigned all the uniforms to mimic those of the Prussian uniforms. Notably, the Prussian military was an adversary, and these specific styles were some 30 years out of fashion. Eventually, these reforms led to his assassination. I think what interested me the most was reading about this time and seeing writers call these reforms ridiculous. Obviously, today we see these uniforms as such, but to read about people lamenting about it back then, about the powdered wigs, the caps, made me realize that there was definitely some comedic potential. Now, delving into the costume making, I would like to start garment by garment. So, when talking about this costume and the making process of it, I'd like to start with the patterns. So, the patterns predominantly were a blend of patterns from Nora Waugh's book, The Cut of Men's Clothes, and also my own patterns that I patterned directly off of extant garments from the Deutsche Historische Museum. So when going through the garment bit by bit, I'd like to start with the gaiters. So the gaiters were patterned directly from gaiters within the Deutsche Historische Museum, but I played around with the design and elongated them significantly. Then we move on to the breeches. These were also loosely based on a pattern from Nora Waugh's book, and I kind of blended it together and made it more of a military style. Moving up the garment, we see the waistcoat. Now, the waistcoat is also based on a extant garment within the Deutsche Historische Museum's collection. This garment specifically contains welted buttonholes and dashed pockets. For my design, I decided to go with a more 19th century linen back, and I also dyed the waistcoat a mint green. For my coat, I decided to kind of do an amalgamation of coats that I saw within the Deutsche Historische Museum. So this amalgamation consisted of taking the cuff style of one coat, the collar style of another coat, analyzing the lapel style of another coat, and kind of blending it all together. I kind of wanted to create my own regiment, will you say. I wanted him to have a unique appearance, and I kind of wanted to just nitpick the styles that I liked and that I thought would look best on my character, while still keeping it very historical. So obviously this uniform would have never existed back in the day, but the historic realism of the costume is so, in my opinion, real that I do think he would have fit right in. Then going up the uniform, we have his fur overcoat. The fur overcoat is loosely based on drawings by Adolf Menzel and also Napoleon's infamous Russia coats. Again, this is very loosely based. This is kind of where I played around with historical accuracy. We know that officers during the time kind of did what they wanted, and it's very possible that some would have had fur-lined coats, but this was more of a stylized choice. I thought it gave him that very burly, macho look that I was going for. Then we have the linen shirt. The linen shirt is also based on a pattern from Nora Wall, but with some modifications. I also did a heavy breakdown on this linen shirt, adding tears to the collar and elbows, and also doing yellow staining using tea bags. Lastly, the miter cap and wig. So the miter cap is based on extant garments, again, within the Deutsche Historische Museum. And this was actually quite a challenge to make, but using the historic patterns that I took from those extant miter caps, I was able to replicate it decently well. The actual metal plate itself is an antique that I found, and I had to use this because sadly I did not have the time to hand stamp metal as much as I wanted to. And yeah, that's the costume. Thank you guys so much, and looking forward to the competition.
My name is Sophie Fretwell, and this is the making of video for Prospero, a costume I designed for a film adaptation of The Tempest for an abstract, dreamlike sequence. The design process was a combination of historical research, digital fabrication, and hours of detailed handcrafting to create a costume that is designed for a key, spectacular moment. The base silhouette is inspired by a loose gown from the 1600s in Janet Arnold's pattern book. I abstracted this into a more otherworldly design, drawing inspiration from the fluidity of historical serpentine dance costumes from early cinema history and the characteristics of water. The bodysuit was designed in Photoshop and digitally printed on fabric and then hand foiled line by line to catch the light. The morph suit was partly inspired by late 16th century or early 17th century vizard. This was a mask worn by people to prevent tanning, and it also looked fairly strange and other and really inspired me. So I painted some thermochromic ink around the mouth so that when the actor breathes, the black ink appears and disappears, reacting to the heat of the breath. The moire effect is a perceptual illusion, so it happens when you have the same pattern and you layer them on top of each other, and as they move against each other it creates this kind of cognitive dissonance and you see almost a glitch-like movement in the pattern. The most ambitious part of this design was the kinetic water droplet sculpture on Prospero's staff. This costume prop took weeks to engineer and build. Some parts were modelled in CAD and 3D printed in transparent TPU filament, and others were laser cut. The cam mechanism was laser cut from clear acrylic discs, and I tried lots of different options again to see what would work the best and give me the transparency and glass-like quality I needed. Playing with translucency and distortion was a big part of this design. I think because that's a lot like Prospero's character. He often distorts the truth, and he isn't quite transparent with people, so I really wanted to play with those themes in the design.